move forward on because the Supreme Court was not able to issue a ruling at this stage. And now we've got a choice about who we're going to be as a country, what we want to teach our kids, and how we want to be represented in Congress and in the White House. We're going to have to make a decision about whether we are a people who tolerate the hypocrisy of the system where the workers who pick our fruit or make our beds never have the chance to get right with the law, or whether we're going to give them a chance, just like our forebears had a chance to take responsibility and give their kids a better future. We're going to have to decide whether we're people who accept the cruelty of ripping children from their parents' arms, or whether we actually value families and keep them together for the sake of all of our communities. We're going to have to decide whether we're people who continue to educate the world's brightest students in our high schools and universities only to then send them away to compete against us, or whether we encourage them to stay and create new jobs and new businesses right here in the United States. These are all the questions that voters now are going to have to ask themselves and are going to have to answer in November. These are the issues that are going to be debated by candidates across the country, both congressional candidates as well as the presidential candidates. And in November, Americans are going to have to make a decision about what we care about and who we are. I promise you this, though. Sooner or later, immigration reform will get done. Congress is not going to be able to ignore America forever. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I can say that with confidence because we've seen our history. We get these spasms of politics around immigration and fear-mongering, and then our traditions and our history and our better impulses kick in. That's how we all ended up here. Because I guarantee at some point, every one of us has somebody in our background who people didn't want coming here. And yet here we are. And that's what's going to happen this time. Now the question is, do we do it in a smart, rational, sensible way, or we just keep on kicking the can down the road? I believe that this country deserves an immigration policy that reflects the goodness of the American people, and I think we're going to get that. Hopefully we're going to get that in November. All right? I'll take two questions. Two questions.
This is one of your highest.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Realistically, what do you see as the risk of deportation for these more than 4 million people? I mean, you say we can't deport 11 million versus 4 million, and there's a chunk of time here.
Well, let me just be very clear. What was unaffected by today's ruling or lack of a ruling is the enforcement priorities that we've put in place. And our enforcement priorities that have been laid out by Secretary Jay Johnson at the Department of Homeland Security are pretty clear. We prioritize criminals. We prioritize gangbangers. We prioritize folks who have just come in. What we don't do is to prioritize people who've been here a long time, who are otherwise law-abiding, who have roots and connections in their communities. And so those enforcement priorities will continue. The work that we've done with the DREAM Act kids, those policies remain in place. So what this has prevented us from doing is expanding the scope of what we've done with the DREAM Act kids. Keep in mind, though, that even that was just a temporary measure. All it was doing was basically saying to these kids, you can have confidence that you are not going to be deported, but it does not resolve your ultimate status. That is going to require congressional action. So, although I'm disappointed by the lack of a decision today by the Supreme Court, a deadlock, this does not substantially change the status quo, and it doesn't negate what has always been the case, which is if we're really going to solve this problem effectively, we've got to have Congress pass a law. I have pushed to the limits of my executive authority, we now have to have Congress act. And hopefully we're going to have a vigorous debate during this election. This is how democracy is supposed to work. And there will be a determination as to which direction we go in. As I said, over the long term, I'm very confident about the direction this country will go in because we've seen this in the past. If we hadn't seen it in the past, America would look very different than it looks today. But whether we're going to get this done now, soon, so that this does not continue to be this divisive force in our politics, and we can get down to the business of all pulling together to create jobs and educate our kids and protect ourselves from external threats and do the things that we need to do to ensure a better future for the next generation. That's going to be determined in part by how voters turn out and who they vote for in November. One more question.
Two practical going forward questions. Number one, are you going to be able to do anything more at all for immigrants going forward in terms of executive action before the election of the next president? And number two, do you in any way take this as some Republicans have presented this as a flat and sure use of executive authority, this tie vote? And will this in any way circumscribe how aggressively or forcefully you use executive authority for the remainder of your time at all?
Okay. On the specifics of immigration, I don't anticipate that there are additional executive actions that we can take. We can implement what we've already put in place that is not affected by this decision. But we have to follow now what has been ruled on in the Fifth Circuit because the Supreme Court could not resolve the issue. And we're going to have to abide by that ruling until an election and a confirmation of a ninth justice of the Supreme Court so that they can break this tie. Because we've always said that we are going to do what we can lawfully through executive action, but we can't go beyond that. And we've butted up about as far as we can on this particular topic. It does not have any impact on, from our perspective, on the host of other issues that we're working on, because each one of these issues has a different analysis and is based on different statutes or different interpretations of our authority. So, for example, on climate change, that's based on the Clean Air Act and the EPA and previous Supreme Court rulings as opposed to a theory of prosecutorial discretion that in the past has every other president has exercised. And the Supreme Court wasn't definitive one way or the other on this. I mean, the problem is they don't have a ninth justice. So that will continue to be a problem. With respect to the Republicans, I think what it tells you is that if you keep on blocking judges from getting on the bench, then courts can't issue decisions. And what that means is then you're going to have the status quo frozen, and we're not going to be able to make progress on some very important issues. Now, that may have been their strategy from the start, but it's not a sustainable strategy, and it's certainly a strategy that will be broken by this election, unless their basic theory is that we will never confirm judges again. Hopefully that's not their theory, because that's not how our democracy is designed. It was a one-part opinion that said we can't come up with a decision. I think that'd be a little bit of a stretch. Yeah, maybe the next time they can. If we have a full court issuing a full opinion on anything, then we take it seriously. This we have to abide by, but it wasn't any kind of value statement or a decision on the merits of these issues.
He leaves for California later today. Thought it was important to address the American people about what has transpired from the Supreme Court today. This executive action was supposed to be a central part of this president's legacy in the waning months of his second term, this temporary relief from deportation for millions in this country. You heard the president there say it's heartbreaking for millions of immigrants, frustrating for the millions who would grow this economy to allow people to come out of the shadows. He also said this is a very real choice for Americans who will head to the polls in November, that this is an election year and that Congress isn't going to be able to ignore this. They will not be able to kick the can on this forever. We'll get to the politics of this in just a moment. Let's bring in Jim Avila, though, who joins us. He's been listening in on this. And Jim, there have been so many tweets about the millions of people who will be affected by this ruling almost immediately. And one tweet that we read said the Supreme Court just delivered a gut punch to millions of immigrants.
Well, that's true, David. In fact, what it does now is put at risk the parents of the children who were born in the United States, but undocumented parents who live here, work here, and who had not broken any laws. They are now again at risk of being deported, even though they have children who are American citizens. What the president's executive action did was protect those parents, eliminate them from the pool of people who could be deported. That is not the case anymore. Although you heard President Obama say that it's not going to change his enforcement procedures. He still believes he has the right to decide to prioritize who gets deported. The reason why he believes that is there's not enough money in the budget given by Congress to deport everybody. So he has to be able to, the Department of Homeland Security has to be able to decide who goes first. The president says criminals go first, those who are involved in gang warfare. But the law-abiding undocumented workers who are here in this country and have been and are not being targeted, and they still won't be targeted. So who's directly affected? Those parents of children who are United States citizens born here, but who are not documented themselves, are now at risk. But it's highly unlikely there'll be deportation raids to go after them.
And Jim, we were just showing pictures there of the situation that we have seen in your reporting and in others' reporting along the border. But the president made it clear that he was also talking about the people in this country who are right now helping to pick fruit, produce from the fields in this country, who are doing a lot of the work that keep this economy going, and that this would have allowed them to come out of the shadows.
It would, and that those are people who have been here, though, David. Remember, the people who are coming across now, who are seeking asylum in this country, are not covered by the executive action that the Supreme Court allowed to be struck down. Those folks who we saw, the Central American immigrants who have come recently, those were not covered by this because the administration didn't want to give them incentive to keep coming across the border. So they excluded them. Not them. But yes, the people who are in the fields now, working in our factories, working on our lawns, working in restaurants, all those people who do not have their papers and who came across illegally are now, even though they're not breaking any other laws, are now subject to deportation.
Jim Avila, our thanks to you. This will undoubtedly make this a key issue in the presidential race, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, as we move into this general election. Clinton just tweeting moments ago, today's heartbreaking immigration ruling could tear apart 5 million families facing deportation. The Clinton campaign also tweeting in Spanish. She said, "We must do better," adding earlier that she believes the president acted well within his constitutional and legal authority. So let's get right to John Carl, because Hillary Clinton signaling almost immediately where she stands. She knows this is a very pivotal issue come November.
And she singled out Donald Trump in that statement, David, saying that this is a stark reminder of the harm Donald Trump would do to our families. We're waiting to hear from Mr. Trump. But you have the stark difference here. In this statement, Hillary Clinton says within 100 days of getting elected president, she would introduce a bill that would provide a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. As you can imagine, Donald Trump in his first 100 days would certainly introduce a bill to build that wall and perhaps deport the 11 million that are here illegally. He's made it clear that that's among his priorities. So the difference couldn't be any starker when it comes to this issue of immigration.
John Carl at the White House. John, we'll see you later on World News Tonight. All of us here at ABC News will be tracking this story throughout the afternoon. Late details at abcnews.com throughout the day, and I'll see you for team coverage tonight on World News Tonight. We return you now to regularly scheduled programming.